If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Kath Bequee. I'm a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I help women feel confident and strong inside out as they navigate pregnancy, birth, and postnatal recovery. Each week, I bring you 2 episodes to support you on your motherhood journey. Whether it's real and raw birth stories from fellow mums, expert interviews with trusted health professionals, or bite-sized Q&As where I answer your most common questions. It is possible to feel amazing in your body during this stage of life, and I want that for you. Come and say hi on Instagram at kathbequee.physio, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Today I'm chatting with Eliza Leslie, who is a qualified ambulance paramedic. She's a mum and founder of Baby Safe Basics. And in today's episode, we're discussing all things choking, gagging and starting solids safely. So with over 8 years of on-road experience, Eliza has created Baby Safe Basics to take the fear out of all the what-ifs we hear about when it comes to our little ones, and she's really passionate about giving parents the tools and confidence to handle emergencies calmly and effectively. So in today's session, we discuss the number one concern parents have when babies are starting solids. We discuss choking versus gagging and what the difference is between the two of them, when to call emergency services, what to do if your baby is gagging or choking, and Eliza also provides some great tips for starting solids safely. This is the episode I really wish I had when my big baby was starting solids over 13 years ago now. There was very little information about, so I'm really excited about today's episode. Enjoy. Eliza, thank you so much for joining me on the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. It is so lovely to chat today.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely. And I know we could talk for hours about so many different things relating to baby first aid, but as we were just saying off air, today is all about choking and gagging, which I remember being the most, I still shudder every time my my babies were gagging. It was probably one of the biggest fears starting solids. So I'm really excited to chat today. Right,
Yeah,
let's dive straight into it.
go for it.
So, I know I've just said my number one concern was gagging, but what do you find working in this space is the number one concern patients have when babies start solids?
It's so funny. And there's like 2 completely different elements to this question because it's like, what's the number one fear parents have that I see doing Baby Safe Basics work? So, like, what
Mm-hmm.
parents want to know about when I run first aid workshops. And then there's I look at it with like the paramedic hat on and like choking, gagging, like we just don't see that commonly in ambulance. It's like not a regular job where we're going to like multiple kids each day having choking episodes. It's like actually very, very rare. But then when people book in a first aid workshop from me, it's like a little question box that they have to fill in. And it's like, what's the number one topic you want to know about and get out of this workshop? And every single person is choking or like solid safety. And it's like the biggest thing that causes most parents the concern, especially when they start that solids age. And I think it's mostly that like this fear is driven from probably social media that makes you think that, every baby that starts solids is going to have a choking episode. And it's like, well, if we actually look at the statistics and, we talk to people in healthcare, it's like, yeah, it happens, but it doesn't happen commonly. It's not a big thing that we're seeing every day. And there's multiple factors into that of like, they have incredible reflexes to protect themselves from having choking episodes. And like we're really good at knowing what is safe to feed babies, and we're watching them and we're making sure that they're eating safely. And that's probably why we
Mm.
see so little of it. But it is the number one thing that there's this massive fear being created around it for new parents starting solids with their babies.
Interesting. And I know there's a lot, like as you mentioned, on social media in terms of the dangers of choking and all the rest. And but this shows how old I am. My big baby is just about to turn 13. So
Wow, yeah.
social media wasn't massive at I don't even know if I had, anyway. At this, but social media wasn't massive. But I remember what put the fear in me was maternal child health nurse sessions. And they said, look, we're about to start baby solids. We're also
Mhm.
going to get you all to do a first aid session all about choking, which is really important when your baby starts solids. And so that was like, alert, alert,
Yeah, yeah.
associating the two
And now,
together.
like, yeah, and now you take that like you might still get that information delivered from you, but then you're also like in your downtime where you're just trying to like zone out, like you've put your
Mm,
child to bed and you're just trying to like scroll on social media and then you're seeing videos of kids choking or like parents having to do choking first aid, and it's like no wonder there's so much fear, like it's just being directed at new parents constantly. And like I know it from the first moment I found out I was pregnant with my son nearly 3 years ago, like the algorithm was just like full of fear-mongering videos of like
mm.
baby deaths and like all the things that can possibly go wrong. And then you start solids and now it's all like the choking safety thing. And it's just like constantly, it's like always going to be in our orbit, this fear. And, social media does so many great things for us, but it also does like create a lot of fear, particularly around this space of starting solids and choking. So, yeah, that's the number one thing that parents want to know about, which is also amazing. And like, like what you said, when you started solids, it was driven in that you need to do a choking first aid course before you start solids. And it's like, yeah, it is a really rare thing to happen with kids, but we still, if it does happen, we need to know how to manage it and we need to know how to do solids safely.
Okay, before we get into that, and I'm putting you on the spot here, are there any statistics? Like you mentioned at the start, you don't see many as a paramedic issues with choking. Do we know what the stats are? Like how do I ask this question? What
I know the stats. I was
percentage
looking at them
of,
yesterday.
okay, oh, go for it.
They're not particularly updated in the last few years for some reason, but the latest stat that I can find is 2021, 2022. There were 6 out of 1.5 million children under the age of 4 died of choking episodes in Australia, and only 134 kids were hospitalized because of choking related incidents. Whereas if
Six
you look at
out
this
of 100
one,
and,
no, 1.5 million.
whoa.
Yeah, so it is a tiny, tiny statistic of like children having deaths from choking episodes in Australia. If you look at that statistic for the age group of over 65, it is in the thousands. Like it's such a
Yeah,
different
right.
thing. And like that's what we see. We see a lot of adults having choking episodes, older adults particularly. Um, Less like young kids having choking episodes. Like I've been called to choking episodes before with kids, but it's always been resolved by the time we got there. I've never actually made it in where I've had to start doing first aid on a child who was choking. Like they're really rare jobs.
Yeah, right.
We might get sent to one and like, it's actually turned out to be a gagging episode, or the parents have gone in and started first aid and that, it's been effective and now they don't need us any longer. But the actual
Mm.
stats behind like kids being hospitalized or kids passing away from choking deaths is very, very low.
I
Like
wish I'd
drowning
known that.
trumps that. People are so shocked. It's the number one thing I start about, like when I start talking about choking in first aid workshops. I'm like, okay, this is like this fear has been created and we can't get rid of that. Like
Okay.
once a fear's there, it's there. But like let's
Yep.
actually break it down and let's have a look at statistically how commonly are kids choking, because like Instagram will tell you that it happens all the time,
Mm.
whereas the statistics tell us that it's not happening regularly at all.
Okay. So we can all take a deep breath, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Now, having said
I
that,
think stats are really, really important.
absolutely. So now let's discuss. Can you please explain the difference between choking and gagging?
Yeah, so when babies start having solids around that 6 month mark, their gag reflex, where ours, for example, will sit really far at the back of our throat, but their gag reflex actually sits really close to the front of their mouth. And it deliberately sits there to teach an important lesson when they start eating food is that you can't just put big pieces of food at the back of your throat and try and swallow them. Like it's going to give you that, it's going to trigger that gag reflex. It's going to give you that really uncomfortable feeling of gagging to try and like send you a message to say, you need to break that down a lot smaller before you're able to safely swallow it. And then, as they start getting established on solids, the gag reflex moves to the back of their throat, where ours would sit. And like it's quite difficult for adults to have gagging episodes, where it's very, very easy for young babies to have gagging episodes because that gag reflex is so triggered. So a gagging episode means that that reflex has been triggered. And what happens for a gagging episode, it actually means your throat muscles here, they contract together to stop you from being able to swallow. And it forces whatever you've gagged on out of your mouth, which is why we always see babies having gagging episodes where their mouth is wide open, their tongue is out, and whatever they've gagged on the piece of food falls out of their mouth onto their high chair tray. Whereas choking is very, very different from that. It's actually where something has gone down the wrong hole, where it's gone down into the airway. And it'll either be a partial obstruction where a little bit of air can still pass up and down the airway, or it'll be fully obstructing it where no air can get down to the lungs and no air can get out of the lungs. So two very, very different things. And the telling the difference between them is also very, very easy to tell the difference between gagging and choking episodes.
Does a gagging episode ever become a choking episode? Or is it, yeah.
It can, like if they've gagged on something and they're actually not able to clear it and say it does go down the wrong hole, down into their airway, it can become a choking episode. Or say, a little one is having a gagging episode and we go and intervene when they're sitting upright by whacking them on the back. That can turn into a choking episode because we've actually like moved where whatever they've been gagging on, it's actually moved and maybe it's fallen down into their airway. So that could become a choking episode, but not commonly. Not commonly it'll go from going from having a gagging episode, because most kids that have gagging episodes, they figure it out and they're able to clear it out. And it's that natural protective mechanism that we say, like, this is actually a really important thing because it's the body's way of protecting a little one from having a choking episode, because those muscles contract together to stop them from being able to swallow, to stop it from being able to go in their airway, to protect them from having a choking episode. And that's why we always say, like, be really confident in knowing what's the difference between gagging and choking so that we don't intervene too early. Or if you're going to intervene, make sure you're intervening by doing your choking first aid properly. Don't go hitting them on the back when they're sitting upright in their high chair, because that could potentially make the situation a little bit worse.
So if they're gagging, don't hit them on the back.
No. If they're gagging, if they're gagging, they're making lots of sounds, they might be red in the face. But otherwise, like, they look quite calm. They're not looking at you looking really panicked. And that's where I say, like, be a duck, which is, ducks under the surface, their legs are going a million miles an hour in the water. But above the surface, they're cool, calm, and collected. And that's how you like want to be as parents when they're having a gag episode. It's like, you're okay. Let's just sit back. We've got time. You're making lots of sounds. Let's just see, are you able to figure it out themselves? And most kids will have a gagging episode on something, spit it out on their high chair, and then they pick it straight back and put it in their mouth. They're usually really, really unfazed by gagging episodes, and they usually will recover really quickly from them.
Okay. Now I do want to ask, but I don't know if I'm jumping to this question. If it develop, okay, at what stage do you want to try to help clear the gag, and what do you do? Or do you just, yeah, at what stage do you intervene?
If it's gagging, like if they're able to make lots of sounds, and like that's the biggest thing of like, are they choking or are they gagging, is the amount of sound they're making. So if they are making all those retching sounds, they've got a really loud cough, like they were sick, like they've got an effective cough, what we'd say, or they're making the retching sounds, like that's where we know that we have time, because the body isn't able to make a lot of sounds when the airway is obstructed, because that's the only way of getting air in and out, and that's what produces sound. So the more sound they make, the more reassured we can be that we're like, yep, okay, we can sit back, give them lots and lots of encouragement. Like, it might have, like, something quite big triggered their gag reflex and it's taking them a while to get up. Just sit down with them and be like, that's it. Like, that was a big one. Like, we need to get that out, keep going. And like, you can cough along with them if you need to, just giving them lots and lots of reassurance and giving them a chance. And like, like I said, that like the younger they are, their gag reflexes are so strong that it's unlikely to take a really long time for them to be able to actually clear that gag reflex. And like, sorry, clear the obstruction if they're gagging, which
Yeah.
isn't actually an obstruction. But if it's triggered that gag reflex, it's very unlikely that it's going to get stuck.
Yeah. Okay. And at what stage would you get them out of the high chair and maybe change her position?
If they're having a gagging episode,
Yeah. You wouldn't?
I wouldn't. Like, no, I wouldn't because it's very unlikely, as I said, for you to need to intervene at all. Because if we're
Mm.
so sure that this is just their gagging, you just really need to like be that duck and like sit back and just be really calm and just like give their body the opportunity. Because coughing, retching, that is the body's protective mechanisms.
Yeah.
That is their best way that they are protecting anything from going down their airway. You just need to give them a chance to get it out.
So don't jump in too early.
No, if they're making sounds, just like be reassured that they are trying to figure this out and their body knows what it's doing. Like the body is so, so clever. Even young babies, they know if that gag reflex has been triggered, their body is trying to clear something. Or if something has gone down that wrong hole and it's caused a partial obstruction where they're choking, but still some air is able to pass through, it's likely that they're going to have an effective cough where they're coughing quite loud. Let them cough along with them. Try and mimic that behavior, try and stay really calm because that is the body's best way that it's
Mm.
going to try and protect itself and clear out their airway.
Okay.
So don't intervene too early. It is so hard to like, especially the first few times when your baby starts solids and they're having lots of frequent gagging, it is so hard to sit back and be like,
Mm.
what, and like not jump into them. And that's why I say like, be that duck. On the
Yeah.
outside, everything is okay. You can be totally freaked out on the inside. But if they are making lots of noise, like just, we've got
Yeah.
time.
I
We've got
feel
time
like
to
I'm a
figure out
pretty
what's
chilled
going on.
person, but this is one situation where I know I've probably jumped in way too early a few
And
times.
like, it's like I said that like I say to parents all the time that like if you're really not sure if they are gagging or choking, pick them up, do the choking first aid. If you do the choking first aid properly, you're not going to make the obstruction any worse. You can make the
Mm.
obstruction worse if you start patting them on the back when they're in the upright position
Yeah.
because you think if something's stuck here and you
Yeah.
start whacking them on the back here, it could move further down.
Yeah.
Whereas the whole point of knowing how to do choking first aid properly is that they're in the right position where their head is down lower than their chest and gravity's helping you and it's only got one way to go, which is up and out.
Okay. Now, this podcast episode does not replace a baby first aid course. Very clear on that.
No,
But
please, like if it's something you're anxious about, please like learn about it because like I
absolutely.
guarantee once you start solids, it's going to be such a fun experience for you
Yeah.
if you eliminate that fear around
Yeah.
choking and starting solids.
Yeah. But with that having said, can you talk us through a few, maybe someone's done baby first aid course or they're about to, but can you just run through a few, I guess, what's your main go-tos apart from having a baby first aid course, completing one? What do you do if you suspect it's progressed from, or your baby's choking?
Yeah, is to just like act really, really fast. Still like trying to be really, really calm. And like, you know, the way I think about it and the way I try and reassure parents is that, you know, if they do have a choking episode, we just need to manage it. And statistically, these maneuvers that we teach in first aid, they work. Like our statistics tell us that they are very, very effective when they are done properly. So, yeah, we need to like, mm,
Oh, I was just going to say, let's pause this because I want to go back to the statistics you said before when there were 6 in 1.5 million that died from choking. Do we know what they were eating or doing at the time? And do we know if they received any first aid?
no, there's none of the like there's none of
Yeah,
no
bummer.
details on
Yeah.
the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, I think it is. But only two of them were on food. I know that much from what it says. And
Ooh,
the rest were on foreign objects. So whatever else has gone
okay.
into a little one's airway.
Well, that's
So
also really important what to do because this is all about
yeah.
choking, gagging, and eating, right? So only 2 out of
Yep.
1.5 million died from.
Yeah, on food. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a really, really low
Yeah.
statistic. And in my career in nearly 9 years, I've been to so many adults choking on food, like so many adults.
Mm,
It's like, but yeah, no, not never made it to
interesting.
kids that are choking on food. So yeah,
Okay. Right.
Um,
But we'll back to that, what you were
yes,
saying, what
what
to
to
do.
do. I was like, where am I up to? Is be reassured that like, yeah, we need to act really fast, but back yourself that like you know how to do these maneuvers, you know how to do them really, really well. So trying as calmly but as quickly as you can, grab them out of their high chair. If you know, most parents do not see a child choking and think like, I'm going to grab my phone and call the ambulance. Like that's just not what most parents think. They think child choking, I'm just going to go straight in and go and help them, which is fantastic. So what we want to do is position them that gravity is going to help us. And that's the biggest thing. Like everyone would have been sitting at dinner, you know, before and somebody started choking on something and someone starts whacking them in the middle of the back. And that's like the worst thing you can do when somebody is having a choking episode is to whack them in the middle of the back because it's actually like you're fighting against gravity because they're in that position.
Even for an adult?
Yep, even for an
Oh my
adult.
God. It's changed since the last few years, has it?
No, 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 no. Like this is like you still whack them in the middle of the back, but not when they're sitting up like this. You want them to lean forward.
Okay.
To
For
change their
adults.
position
Okay.
is,
Yeah.
yep, yep, to make sure that gravity is helping you. Because, like, you think about
Yeah.
this if something's stuck in here, whacking
Yeah.
me in the middle of the back, it's probably just going to do this. Whereas
Yeah.
if I lean forward a little bit and someone whacks me in the middle of the back, it's going to go
Yeah.
up and
Got it.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so position them in a position where head lower than the chest, which for most, you know, little ones, you can get them across your lap.
Yeah.
Head lower than the chest, and then in the middle of their shoulder blades with the palm of your hand, 5 really hard whacks. Um, and you want these to be really, really hard because you want to create vibration to move something that's stuck in a really small spot to get it out. But the biggest thing with that is make sure their head is lower than their chest. So gravity's helping you here. Yeah. And then so you do 5 of them. If they're still choking, you flip them over, still across your lap, support the back of their head lower than chest, and you do chest thrusts, which are essentially compressions like what you do CPR. They're just slower and harder than when you give CPR. And you just keep alternating between 5 back blows and 5 chest thrusts until they spit out whatever they were choking on, or they start making lots of sounds, or they start crying because you're hitting them in the middle of the back, and which is all reassuring signs because it means that they're not choking anymore as soon as they start making noise. Or, yeah, if they became unresponsive, then obviously, you know, that's where we start to do our CPR. But incredibly unlikely that you actually even make it to doing the chest thrust. It's usually the back blows. If you do them head on the chest and you make them really, really hard in the right spot, that's what's going to be really effective.
Yep. Beautiful. And when to call emergency?
Yeah, so like I said, like, you know, most parents wouldn't think, you know, see child choking and grab their phone, which is totally fine. If there's 2 of you there, it's obviously so much easier. One grab the child and do the first aid, and one call the ambulance. If though you didn't call the ambulance in the beginning, say you do 5 back blows and 5 chest thrusts, and you know you've done 1 round of that and it hasn't been effective, they're still choking. It's at that point we start to make it a priority that we need to get the ambulance moving towards you. And you
Yep.
know it's very likely that you'll say, "Oh, actually, they're not choking anymore. We don't need you," and they'll be totally
Yep.
fine. But if you've called us, don't cancel us, keep us coming. We'll just come out. We want to check them over.
Yep. Okay. Great. Love it. Now, now that we've done all that, I guess first aid sort of thing, are you happy to talk through some tips for starting solids safely?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this. I think there's so much, you know, there's such a huge emphasis on talking about like what foods not to give them because they're the highest choking risk foods. And it's like, well, there's actually so much we can do to reduce the risk of choking that have absolutely nothing to do with what they're actually eating. So
Mm-hmm.
my only hard and fast rule in well, I have 2 hard and fast rules in parenting, but the one that's like really, really big that I use still every day with my son, who's 2.5, is that he always needs to be sitting down to eat food. Like if you start doing that when they start solids and carry it through, it's going to stay with them forever. And that's what I mean by that is like, you know, when your baby starts solids, make sure they're always in an upright position to be eating food. So either in a high chair or sitting on your lap. We don't want them in bouncers in a reclined position, avoiding prams, avoiding feeding them in car seats as much as we can. Because that reclined position makes it unsafe for swallowing, and it also makes it unsafe for protecting the airway if they needed to cough, if something did go down into that wrong hole. And then, yeah, sitting down to eat food always, and just like trying to split distractions with eating. So really avoiding popping them in front of the TV or in front of an iPad whilst they're having food. Because obviously if you take the attention away from what they need to do to safely eat that food onto something that's light, bright, making lots of fun sounds, they're obviously shifting the focus and they're not concentrating on what they are doing and they're not
Do you,
focusing on what they're eating.
do you think that is like that makes sense, but do you think that is actually, and just this is the cynical me questioning that, do you think that is actually linked with improved risks of choking, that like being in front of the TV or device?
I think so. Like, I think about it for myself, and like, if I'm watching a movie and I'm eating something in front of me, or, I'm having dinner in front of the TV, like, I am not concentrating on what I am eating. I am concentrating on the TV. And like, I'm a pretty good eater with pretty good
Mm,
chewing abilities to safely swallow food. But it's also like safe eating, but it's also intuitive eating as well. Like, I'm not
yeah.
concentrating what's on my plate. I'm probably not stopping if I'm full because I'm so in tune to what's going on in the
Yeah.
TV rather than
Not
what's
that I
what's
agree
on
with.
my plate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think for like younger kids as well with like distractions, it doesn't even have to be like TVs and iPads. Distractions can be crawling around the house. It can be like
Yeah.
playing with toys at the same time. Like I had a friend yesterday like send me a message to say like, oh, I just wanted to let you know that this happened this morning. Like she dropped her baby off at daycare and her baby was given a piece of toast. And when she came back past the room, the baby was crawling around with a piece of toast in their mouth. And it's like,
Mm,
that is
yeah.
unsafe. We can't be
Yeah.
doing that. So that's a distraction, like crawling
Mm,
around, hunting for toys, running around, like playing in
yeah.
playgrounds with food in their mouth. Like
That's
that makes
huge.
me want to
Mm,
scream. Like
yeah.
that isn't one thing that like really irritates me. I'm like, just if we can try and as best as we can,
Yeah.
like obviously when they become toddlers and they become early childhood, like it becomes you get constant pushback from them wanting to sit down when they're eating. But that's why we just try as best as we can to teach them that from a really young age. Like, okay, well, if you're finished eating, your food stays at the table. You can leave
Yeah.
the table, no worries if you don't want any more, but your food is staying here.
Yeah. Yeah. Love
So
that.
that's like a really big one is just like sitting upright and sitting down to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. And with that no food in the car situation, the pram,
Mm.
realistic, like theoretical me goes, yep, I totally agree with that. Realistic me, who is perhaps driving their baby,
Yeah.
a few hours, needs a distraction. Are there any
Yeah.
safe, like yogurt pouches,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yogurt pouches, smoothies that you can pop in those like no mess bottles,
Okay.
pureeing foods, mashing foods, anything that like, obviously the younger they are with the inexperienced eating, you're not going to give them
Yeah.
anything that requires them to, really
Yeah, yeah.
focus on chewing and breaking it down. But yes, like absolutely feed them in the pram and like, I'm constantly handing my son snacks in the car. I'm
Yeah.
not giving him anything that I know is like going to be a little bit tricky for him or
Yeah.
a little bit difficult to clear if he was in the recline
Yeah.
position. It's
Okay.
usually, yeah, yogurt, really soft foods.
Okay. Phew. All right.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not
I didn't
saying
stuff up
don't
too
ever
much.
feed them. No, 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 no. Oh my gosh, yeah. And all of this is like, the reality in things. It's like,
Yeah.
let's be real. Like we're constantly like cooking food and handing our kids food to distract them because you just need a
Mm,
minute to yourself or you
yeah.
need to be on the phone and stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and just like tell them to sit down when they're gonna
Yeah.
eat that.
Okay, I love that. So number one tip for starting solids safely is all about positioning and, you know, being sitting and being focused on eating.
Yeah, yeah. And like,
Okay.
and then the next thing I'd say would be to like make sure that you're adapting food and it's meeting like where they're at developmentally. So babies are able to break down food really well with just their gums. They don't need teeth to be able to break down food, but you just got to make sure like the shape, the texture, or the size of that food is what's going to be safe for them. So the younger they are, the bigger the piece of food is what's best for them because they're not able to, for a whole strawberry, for example, they're not going to be able to fit a whole strawberry in their mouth and try and swallow it. They just won't be able to do that. But obviously, when they get a little bit older, it becomes like smaller pieces of sliced strawberries are a lot safer for them because they probably do have the strength and to be able to fit that whole strawberry in their mouth and break it down a little bit. And that's where it becomes a little bit unsafe, where they might take off bigger chunks and try and swallow them.
Okay, Eliza, I feel this is a bit of a trauma session for me. So this is probably why I was so confused because with my first baby, and again, 13 years ago, I don't know if baby-led weaning was a big thing. We had a talk, again, it was around the time we were all starting solids, and it was a baby-led weaning talk. And there was a mum there, like, so there was a expert, can't remember what they were, but discussing baby-led weaning, which they pretty much said, let your child have whatever, they can sort it out. And they had a mum there with her 10-month-old, it was a crawling baby. So it didn't have
Mm.
many teeth, like just a few teeth. And there was eating a whole apple as it's like crawling around the ground. And
Mm.
it was munching on this apple. And I was like, I was like totally gobsmacked. But there was, I think, other two schools of thoughts whether or not to do, as what you just said, start slow, start developmentally, which totally to me makes sense. But then I'm getting told, give them whatever and they'll be able to process it or they won't, by themselves. So
Yeah.
I was so
And like
confused.
give them whatever within reason. Like, we don't want to like throw them into the Hunger Games and be like, all the best, you're on your own. Like, it's still within reason with things. Like the whole apple for a 10-month-old is like, yeah, because like probably the rationale behind that is that they do not have the strength to be able to bite off a big chunk of apple. It's
Yeah,
really likely that they're taking off
little
only tiny
nibbles.
little pieces. Whereas if you give them like a wedge of apple, for example, they could bite off like a big piece of the wedge, and that's where it becomes an
Mm,
issue. Does that
yeah,
make sense? And yeah, whereas when they're like a lot younger, a whole, like say 6 months when they start having solids, a big wedge of apple is very unlikely to be really unsafe for them because they don't actually have the strength to bite off any of the
yeah,
pieces of
right.
apple yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
It's like
confusing.
it's so confusing. It's really hard to get your head around. But that it is really lucky when the younger they are that they have that really dominant gag reflex that is going to try and protect their body from having choking episodes, which is
Okay,
amazing. It's really reassuring.
so on social media again, you see all these photos of, chopping cherry tomatoes into quarters, grapes into quarters, um, grating apple. Like what are your thoughts around that? At what stage is that appropriate and when did you develop from there?
Yeah, so I think that like the biggest thing with food being safe and is that you need to like change the shape, size, or texture because we're thinking about cherry tomatoes or blueberries or grapes, for example. They are hard circular shaped food. So if they were to go whole down the airway, it's going to fully obstruct the flow of air and it might be a little bit difficult to try and clear with our first aid maneuvers. And so that's where you change the shape of it. So instead of it being circular shapes, it's now quartered little wedges where if it does go down into the airway, it's not going to totally block the flow of air. I still think there needs to be a big emphasis on like teaching them how to break down food really, really well. So like whole grapes, offer them at a stage where you're really comfortable that they are safe, practicing safe eating habits by sitting down and they have really good chewing abilities and like sit down with them and explain to them that like we take extra care when we have our grapes and, sit down and mimic along the behavior of like big chews, chew, chew, chew. Because the biggest thing that I worry about is that if they've never had any of these foods that we say
Mm,
to avoid because they're high choking risk foods, what are they going to do when that food is offered to them and maybe
mm,
you're not there to take it away or
yep.
you're not there
At
to
a
control that
birthday party.
situation? Exactly, yeah. And so, you want to make sure that you teach them that if they're going to have these higher risk choking foods, that their first thing that they'll go and do is they go and sit down. Like we don't want kids running around with a mouthful of popcorn or cherry tomatoes or grapes or whatever it is. Um, we want them to be able to sit down and we want them to know that like we take extra care to break down this food. Like
Hmm.
this is a food that we need to, be really careful and really practice safely our really strong chewing. And I just make it a game. Like my son's 2.5, I give him whole grapes and I just sit down with him and I'm like, how many chews can you do? And like, not talking with our mouth full with the grapes in our mouth, but just like chew, chew, chew. That's it, buddy. Keep chewing. Good job. Like
Mm,
those sorts of
yep,
things. And I just trust that like if he's offered a grape somewhere when I'm not there, he'll sit down and he'll know I need to do my big chews.
yep. Love that emphasis on teaching your child as well.
Yeah, like it's such an important thing, and like communication can go so far with teaching our things like without teaching our kids safe things about eating, whether it's food. Because like food's not the enemy. We can choke on any
Mm,
food. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, but
yeah.
we become really frightened of these particular foods and we say don't offer them till, what age they are. But it's like well, nothing changes when they get to that age.
Yeah.
Like we're all of a sudden giving them a food that maybe they've never had before and they actually don't
Yeah.
know how to eat it safely. Like let's maybe do it at an age where we're comfortable in doing it
Mm,
and teach them how they are able to actually eat this food safely.
totally makes sense. Love it.
Mhm.
Okay, so any other tips for starting solids safely?
Yeah, I think that like I think I'd say like don't be in a race and don't compare yourself to anyone else is like a really big one. I think there's like, you know, you open up Instagram and like amongst everything else that's going on, but every kid's lunch box looks like this incredibly immaculate bento box that is like so put together. And it's like, okay, that might be the real reality for some parents, but that is totally unachievable for a lot of other parents. Like they don't need to be eating fancy recipes, fancy meals, like
Mm,
whatever, to be well nourished. Like do as best you can. Like, you know,
yeah.
if food is good enough for me, it's good enough for my child to eat, I think. So I just try not to overcomplicate it and I don't compare myself to anyone else. And I don't think that like I don't try and be hard on myself if he's not eating particular foods or his lunchbox does, you know, has a Vegemite and cheese sandwich and whatever. It's like he's healthy. He is like I'm still offering foods. But I'm just trying to not like put too much pressure on myself about what he's eating. And I think that that
Mm,
like says so much is like run your own race and like solids isn't a race. You don't have to be doing baby led weaning at the beginning if that feels really uncomfortable for you. Like don't do it. That's not an appropriate starting point for you if it totally freaks you out. I think if it does freak you out, you should do a like a baby solid first aid course for
do your
sure to talk
course.
about
Yeah.
it. Yeah, do my course and you won't feel stressed about it. But
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
that really freaks a lot of people out. So if starting on purees feels comfortable for you, start there. That's amazing. And then you're just constantly building on it. And then you'll get to a point eventually where they're eating foods and it's not feeling like, you know, you're hanging on the edge of the
Mm,
high chair, like totally freaked out, really not enjoying this experience. Because, you know, it's a milestone. You meet with your baby. It should be fun. It should be exciting. You should get
yeah.
lots of joy out of watching their facial expressions like screw
Yeah.
up and, you know, just different reactions to food. It shouldn't be something that's
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, love that. And on that note, like what you just said, I have for anyone who's listening that wants more information, I did do an episode with pediatric dietitian Carla Smith about starting solids with confidence, where she talks more about um, the different offerings, exploring food and like next level to what we've just been talking about today, which is like the safety side of things. So I'll link that in the show
Yeah,
notes.
amazing. That would be an incredible follow-on.
Okay, Eliza, this has been fabulous. This has been an episode I wish I'd listened to with my first and second and third babies. Is there anything else you'd like to finish with that we haven't mentioned that you think would be important for new time or parents who are starting solids to know?
I think just like if starting solids, like if you're not there yet and you know it's creeping up on you a little bit, and if you are starting to really feel nervous about it, that like exposure therapy doesn't help. You're not all of a sudden going to start solids and the fear of choking completely go away.
Mm,
So like
yeah.
attack it like head on, learn about it because once you
Mhm.
learn about it and you understand it and you know you learn about the statistics and like how to effectively do choking first aid and like
Yeah.
how their bodies are actually made to protect themselves, you're going to go into solids like with that enjoyment. You're going to feel
Yeah.
really excited about this milestone. It doesn't have like feeding your baby should not be a scary thing. So if it feels
Yeah.
overwhelming, you're feeling really nervous heading in there, do something about it in the beginning because otherwise you're just going to, you know, you're going to be long-term puree feeding with them because giving them any chunks of food is just going to feel incredibly fearful for you. And,
Yeah.
you know, then that can rub off on our kids as well. They sense that fear. So
Mm,
that's what we want to
absolutely.
avoid. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Amazing. So, Eliza, how can listeners find you?
So I run Baby Safe Basics, which is my own little first aid biz. So on Instagram, I post lots of like educational content on there. I have a Starting Solids online course, which is linked up on my Instagram as well. And yeah, everything is
Yeah.
really on there. That's like the easiest way these days to access anyone is on social media, isn't it?
Fantastic. And I'll put all the links in the show notes. Thank you, Eliza, for chatting today. I feel like I'd love to chat in a future episode all about all the other aspects of baby first aid.
Yeah, that
So I
would
might
be
have to have you
great.
back. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast brought to you by Fitness Mama, your app for home-based, physio-led pregnancy and postnatal workouts. If you found this episode helpful, please tap follow, leave a quick review and share it to your stories. Tag at kathbequee.physio. I'd love to connect and cheer you on. And don't forget to check out the free trial at fitnessmama.com/free to start feeling confident, strong and supported today. Until next time, remember, a strong body, a confident birth and empowered recovery is something you deserve. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for individual medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider for your personalised guidance.